Welcome to the Dr. Warren Gage podcast. We are continuing our exposition of Revelation 21 and 22, and we've come now to verse 9. So I want to look at this. This helps us to contextualize it within the argument of the book. He said, "Then came one of the seven angels who had the seven bowls, or vials, full of the seven last plagues, and spoke to me, saying, 'Come, and I will show you the bride, the wife of the Lamb.' And he carried me away to a great and high mountain, and showed me the holy city, Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, having the glory of God." Now, who is this angel? We are told this is the seventh angel. Actually, we're not told that. We're told one of the seven angels, but this is the last of the seven angels that are enumerated when we reconstruct them. That begins in Revelation 17:1. And it's very clear that there's a pattern here. In 17, John writes, "Then one of the seven angels," same language that he uses in our passage, "who had the seven vials or bowls, said to me, 'Come, and I will show you the judgment of the great whore, who is seated upon many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the wine of his fornication the dwellers of the earth have become drunk.'" So he's describing, this is the first of seven angels in chapter 17. The seventh angel, the last of the seven angels, is described in 21:9. "Then came one of the seven angels," that is the seventh angel if we count them. So the whole last section here, beginning in 17:1, actually through 22:6, is describing these seven last angels. So these seven angels are described, a series of them. The seven last angels, the first one in chapter 17:1 shows them the whorish Babylon and what will transpire there in terms of judgment. The last one in 21:9 shows him this one shows him the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven. We'll need to talk about that. It's a very significant word, coming down out of heaven, and this will be the bride. So we have the whorish city and the virginal, bridal New Jerusalem. The contrast could not be greater. And so what that means is then there are seven angels. The fourth angel, which is the central angel, always in a pattern of seven, the fourth is the focal point. The fourth angel is in Revelation 19:11, and that actually is Christ himself. It was the angel of the covenant, but he's the angel of the Lord, and Christ's description there is magnificent. Revelation 19:11, it says, John is describing it, "Then he said, I saw the heaven opened, and behold a white horse, and he who sat upon it," that is the horse, "is called Faithful and True, and in righteousness he judges and makes war. His eyes are a flame of fire, and on his head are many diadems, and he has a name inscribed which no one knows except himself. He is clad in a robe dipped in blood, and the name by which he is called is the Word of God." And so he comes with the armies of heaven, and he comes in the middle of these seven angels. He comes to divide the wicked from the righteous, and to satisfy the cry of those who are under the altar, saying, "How long, O Lord?" This is the promise that he is surely coming. And he comes to vindicate. He's right in the middle between wicked Babylon, which has just been described, and the virginal New Jerusalem. So Christ is the central vision, and in this pattern of seven angels. And the seventh then angel is the subject of what we're reading here. The seventh angel will show him the bride, the wife of the Lamb. So the first angel showed him the whore. The last angel here will show him the bride, the wife of the Lamb. And all conflict is done. All warfare is completed. So the whole of Revelation 17 to 22:6 is a unity, which is interesting because it raises all kinds of questions. If it's a unity, if it's one complete vision with Christ at the center, then how does that relate to chronology? Is it consequential, or is it all of one piece? Is there a sequence of time, or is these are visions that are given to John? He sees this. Is he seeing a sweep of history, or is he seeing one complete vision whose point is that Christ is the divider between the just and the unjust? All authority and judgment is given to him. So then came one of the seven angels who had the seven bowls full of the seven last plagues. So he is pouring out judgment. That's what he does in Revelation 19. He treads out the wine of the wrath and pours out judgment on the wicked. And he spoke to me, saying, "Come, and I will show you the bride, the wife of the Lamb." Now what happens is he's taken to a wilderness, and there in chapter 17, the first angel shows him the whore city, and it is Babylon, which I've argued is Jerusalem. The commonality there is that Babylon is the city that destroyed the temple of God. But it was ordained to destroy the temple of God, and Jeremiah said that God would visit his own wrath upon Babylon because they will do it unrighteously, but nonetheless they will do it under the sovereign authority of God. Well, Jerusalem is the city that destroyed the true temple of God. That quarrel is identified in chapter 2 of the Gospel. Jesus is in the temple, and he calls them out. He challenges them, destroy this temple. And they think it's the temple of Herod that surrounds them. And so they misunderstand him entirely, which the disciples did too, but they understood it after the Spirit was given and after the resurrection. Jesus is commanding his enemies to destroy him, the temple of his body. That will then bring about the destruction of their temple. He begins it with a pattern of judgment with a scourge. And when the unbelieving Jews bring upon him judgment at the end of when his hour comes, they begin with a scourging. So it's all anticipatory. What they will do to him is what will happen to their own temple. So it's a quarrel between two temples, and that's the context of it. So anyway, it says the seven bowls are the seven last plagues spoken to me, saying, "Come and I will show you the bride, the wife of the Lamb." That means the plagues are done. And so what he sees is the heavenly Jerusalem not being built up from earth to heaven, but coming down from heaven to earth. So what happens in the ancient world is what they would have understood as Babylon is the wicked city that is destroyed. But then it will be rebuilt, and that pattern of destruction and rebuilding creates what is called a tell in the ancient world. Their cities, they want to be built on a high ground that has a water source typically, so that they can withstand a siege, and they can have the advantage, the artillery advantage, of defending themselves in times of an attack, and they can see an enemy coming. So all the cities were built on high grounds, an acropolis, and so that's true also in Jerusalem. It was very defensible between the Tarpeian and the Kidron valleys. The city of David was quite defensible. But this city is destroyed, and that destruction is described when Babylon is destroyed in chapter 18. So it's all taken down, and now instead of being rebuilt over, the heavenly city comes down upon that place and supplants it. So it's coming down upon the place where the old Jerusalem was, and that's in this world. So that's the logic here. Now, the idea of the city coming down, this is a long remembrance in contrast with Babel, the city of rebellion. God, after the flood, commanded the sons of Noah to scatter, to fill the earth and subdue it. But instead they collectivized themselves. They did not want anything to divide them, so they found a plain, and they attempted to build a tower, they said, in their titanic pride, that will pierce the clouds and reach into heaven itself. And their wicked motivation was, I think, perhaps to avoid the judgment that was now fresh in their memory of what had happened during the days of the flood. So they build this ziggurat, a staged pyramid, after the form That's what the word means, ziggurat. It's a staged pyramid, like the you can look it up in any you can Google ziggurat. The root there, the Akkadian root, is related to the word that describes the step pyramid at Saqqara. Saqqara is related ultimately and originally an Afro-Asiatic precursor to ziggurat, Saqqara, and ziggurat Sokar was the god of death. And that's where Pharaoh Dozier built his the first true pyramid, and it's staged. It's got that, it keeps that remembrance. It doesn't have the sleek coated walls that the later pyramids had. So the oldest form of it is the step pyramid, and John is describing a staged city with 12 foundations that comes down out of heaven. And so what they're building is something that is similar to this last vision, but it is altogether primitive. And so these Babel builders they're on an alluvial plain, just like Giza is an alluvial plain of the Nile. Babel is in the alluvial plain of the Tigris-Euphrates. There are no mountains there. They know that God is worshipped on a mountain, so they build artificial mountains. They'll build stone pyramids, like a stairway to heaven, or a ziggurat, which is the same idea, stairway to heaven. And so, but they make it, we're told, Moses tells us they have dried brick, sun-dried brick for stone. They don't have authentic stone, they have artificial stone. It's all of it's manufacture. And then they have bitumen or pitch for mortar. So it doesn't sound like an attractive place at all. But in any case, I think that's part of the reason that those remembrances are preserved. The best that man can do is something that is really hideously ugly in its construction. And by contrast, the city that Christ will make, the true city, when it comes down from heaven, is made of precious jewels and gems, with golden streets and battlements of rubies and foundations of diamonds. And so it's a very different construction. It's the difference between what Christ manufactures and what the humanity, fallen humanity, can do. So he says, I will show you the bride, the wife of the Lamb. And in the Spirit he carried me away to a great high mountain. That's the mountain of Isaiah 2nd, that will be in the last days lifted up, the Mount of Jerusalem, to be the highest among the nations, and the nations will flow to it. He uses the language of a river, but they're flowing upstream, which is contrary to gravity. And that's his way of suggesting that it's a supernatural city. The nations will flow to it like rivers going up. It's an ecumenical city. It's the city of the gospel, because the nations are invited to come. So he carried me away to a great and high mountain, and showed me the holy city Jerusalem coming down out of heaven from God, having the glory of God. God has made it, so it's in contrast to the cities of man that men make here that have no permanence. The idea of a tell means there is no permanent. Here, like Hebrews will say, we have no continuing city. Wherever we are in this world, we have no continuing city. I remember I was once on a train going through Switzerland, which is high in the mountains, probably the most defensible country on earth, and one of the wealthiest probably, or was at the time, place. Beautiful farmland in the valleys, but the mountains are just reach up to the heavens. And I saw a barn, and obviously it was a believing family, and they had written, you could read it on the train, they wanted to witness to the people that were on the train, and they had written, Hier haben wir keine ewige Stadt. Here we have no continuing city. And it was magnificent. So it stirred my heart, remembrance, to think, my goodness, here's a family of faith, and they realized, in spite of having this most magnificent farmland at the very summit of the world, in the high alpine country, and most stable currency and stable government in the world, they realize even in that context there is no continuing city here, but they're looking in faith to this eternal city that has foundations. So quite a testimony they left. So come, and I will show you the bride, the wife of the Lamb. And in the Spirit he carried me away to a great and high mountain, and showed me the holy city Jerusalem coming down out of heaven from God, having the glory of God, its radiance like the most rare jewel, like a jasper, clear as crystal. Now, we were going to be given a list of jewels. The foundations are all precious stones, precious, or by our terms, semi-precious as well. Stones that describe these 12 apostles. The foundations are named for the apostles of the Lamb, that is, the messengers to the nations, where Christ is bringing the whole world under his dominion. And that we're told that the whole city had a radiance like a most rare jewel, like a jaspis, a jasper stone, they render it. We don't know what the jasper was. The jasper is hard to define in any case because it's a kind of an agate, and it has red. There's red, yellow, and brown are the primary. Well, the primary color is red, and then it also has yellow and brown and sometimes blue and even green. There are jaspers that look like an emerald. So it can have a number of different manifestations, which makes it very hard to identify the jasper stone. The jasper was thought to be by Flinders Petrie, and I don't know if he was an amazing archaeologist back before the First World War, but his stuff is pretty dated at this point. He identified the jasper with the first stone and the breastplate of the high priest, the Olim stone. I don't know on what basis he did that, but in any case, that was the association he made. That it might have been because that's the first stone that's mentioned here in this description, but we're not certain. We're certain of some of them. Some of the stones we can recognize, the emerald and the ruby, but some of the others are very difficult. We try to come up with some kind of archaeology and etymology. Chrysoprase, for example, the chrysos we know means golden, so it could be flakes of gold, it could be spotted, we don't know. But I'm intrigued by the idea that the jasper stone was the first one that Petrie identified on the breastplate, the Olim stone of the high priest. And I think that one is significant and suggestive. What that means is the high priest carried these 12 stones on his breastplate, and I think it represents ultimately the priest as a type of Christ. And I think that means that the heavenly city, these 12 precious stones that are on his breastplate closest to his heart, indicates his priority and his love, that we who are these, constitute these stones in the city, are always on his heart and closest to his affections. And so he is the one who is constantly interceding for us, which is the primary work of the priest, is intercession. And so that's wonderful to think that he is thinking of us and has been for all eternity, and he is fashioning us. The heavenly city is largely fashioned in heaven, and that's where most of the church is at this point. Most of us, after all of these 70 some odd generations since the first century, most of the church is now with the Lord in heaven. And they themselves are, there's a progress going on there. They're being taught patience, for one thing, we know. They're always crying out, "How long, O Lord?" And so I take that to mean that in heaven we are continuing to grow. Even though we are without sin, we are dynamically being conformed to Christ, and that pattern will continue on for all of eternity. It's asymptotic. He's infinite. We are finite. We will always be becoming more like him, but never exhausting him in all of his glory. So anyway, some thoughts. This material is so pregnant with ideas. He describes it like a jewel, like a jasper, and because of it, there's so many different varieties of jasper, it's really hard to know precisely what he is talking about. We've got different names for some of these stones, as I've said. And it had a great and high wall with 12 gates. So it has 12 foundations and 12 gates. And it's a composite city, which shows that it's talking about the people of God being made into one community. The gates are named for the sons of Jacob. And the foundations are named for the apostles to the nations, the 12 sons of Jacob and the 12 apostles that received the commission to bring dominion to all the earth. And so he's describing one composite city. There is one people of God. There are not two. There is one people of God. They constitute one city. All of these who have like precious faith, as Peter would call it. It had a great and high wall with 12 gates, and at the gates were 12 angels. And on the gates the names of the 12 tribes of the sons of Israel were inscribed. On the east 3 gates, on the north 3 gates, on the south 3 gates, and on the west 3 gates. And we would know how where these names are, actually, because it would follow the order of the tribes that were arranged around the central sanctuary, the Amphictyony of the tabernacle. Amphictyony is a Greek word that was used, forget the name of the man that used it originally, Cyrus Gordon, I think, but it described, in the ancient world, they would typically have, if there was a conurbation, if there were a number of little villages or cities, they worshiped the same god, they would have a central sanctuary, a temple to Athena, but they would have 12 months of the year in which each district would take control of supplying what was needed and manning, as it were, staffing that central sanctuary. And so that model is found, like with the sacred island of Delos and the Aegean Sea, the Delian, the Cyclades, the islands that surround Delos, the sacred island, that form a kind of a circle. That's where we get our word cycle, actually. That was one of these amphictyonic leagues. And so if the tabernacle was the same, we're given the order of the tribes. On the eastern side was Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun, which is most identified with Christ, because Zebulun and Issachar were given allotments in Upper and Lower Galilee, and that order is Zebulun and Naphtali. So that was the Galilee. Judah is in the south, and that was Christ himself is from the tribe of Judah. So these are the 3 tribes on the east. And then on the opposite side, on the west, are the tribes of Joseph. And those would be Benjamin and Manasseh and Ephraim. And that's interesting because of the arrangement there on the eastern side, where the entrance to the city is Judah, and on the western side are the tribes of Joseph. And I think that that's with significance too. In the Joseph account, we read of his brothers, who will be the patriarchs of Israel, the sons of Jacob. They will each be the father of a tribe, the 12 tribes. In the beginning of the narrative, in chapter 37, we have Joseph. And Joseph is a wonderful, godly, believing son to Jacob. He's faithful, and he has tremendous faith, and he's given revelations and dreams. And those dreams provoke the jealousy of his brothers, who hated him. He and his younger brother Benjamin were the 2 sons of Rachel, the favored wife. And so all of them, the other sons, were sons of Leah or the handmaidens, so they were less favored. And they felt that, and the jealousies that seemed to feed. And they hated Joseph for his dreams, and God spoke to him in ways that he didn't speak to the others. His father gave him a coat of many colors, which anticipates the city, to show his favor. He was his chosen son, as it were. He was favored, he was trusted, he was faithful. And Joseph had dreams, and that provoked the jealousy of his brothers, and they wanted to kill him, which shows, John would testify, if they have hate in their heart, they're not in the faith. So these are the sons of Jacob before they had come to a saving faith. And Joseph spoke dreams that said that they would all bow down to him, so that provoked further jealousy. I think a lot of people say that he was foolish in saying that. I don't think so. He's proclaiming the word of God. The problem was not Joseph. The problem really was the brothers. Their hearts were wicked. So anyway, they conspired to kill him. And so here is the Cain and Abel story being reenacted in the family that would bring redemption to the world. It's not a very good story in chapter 37. Chapter 38 shows the limits of the depravity of Judah, which is horrible, horrific. But as the story unfolds, Joseph is sold by Judah, whose Greek name, by the way, is Judas. He's sold for silver pieces into bondage in Egypt, which is the land of the graves. And so the brothers thought that they'd done away with him, which was their intention. Judah having come upon the plan to sell him into slavery, which is, and away from the people of God. But as history went on, as the development took place, the brothers came to a saving faith through many different trials. The evidence of that is that Judah, who wanted to kill his brother, when he has to go back to Egypt to get grain for the family, and he can only go if he brings his brother Benjamin with him, and Jacob, his father, is unwilling to let him go because he doesn't want to lose the only connection to Rachel that he still has, and to Joseph. He will not release him. And Judah knows that they can't return and rescue Simeon, who's held in captivity, as a surety that they will return. And so he says, we can't do that. I have to go. He said, I will be surety myself. I will take his place and bear the sin, that is, any damage that comes to him, before my father forever. So the amazing thing about the Joseph story is that Judah, during those years when Joseph is being promoted in Egypt, which God had sent him to prepare a way, to prepare a place for the people, to deliver them through the famine, Judah has come to saving faith, and he's willing to offer his life as a substitute for his brother, which is the opposite of what he had done with Joseph. And when Jacob hears that, then he releases Benjamin to go to Egypt with that surety that Judah will bring him back. And so, in other words, it's a story of tremendous redemption. The brothers have come to faith when Joseph tests them when they're down in Egypt. He's testing them to see if they're jealous against one another, if their enmity is there with one another. They have come back because Simeon, they want to redeem their brother. They brought their younger brother, so they've spoken the truth. And when he piles up the dinner portions and gives Benjamin 5 times more than everyone else, then they don't seem to have any jealousy at all. It's at that point Joseph realizes that they've learned to love one another, and at that point he can reveal himself to them. And so he says to them, I am Joseph, your brother. And they fall away from him. They had no idea. He spoke through the masquerade of a disguise. He was disguised like an Egyptian official, dressed like an Egyptian official. He spoke through an interpreter, even though he understood every word that they were saying. And but he drops the masquerade. Masquerade is typically a device of comedy. It's the mask. And they had no idea that the Egyptian official that had the power of life and death over them was their brother. And when he reveals himself, they're terrified. They think that that's the reckoning for their sin many years ago, that they lived in some guilt and grief about. And so Joseph says to them, come closer, come to me. And he beckons them to come, and you can imagine this embrace of the 12 brothers as he speaks forgiveness to them. He says, don't hold it to your account. You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good, which is a tremendous hope that we have Everything that was meant by the wicked as evil against us, God intended in his sovereignty in order to bring tremendous good out of it. And Joseph recognizes that he was sent before them. He uses the language of Christ. I was sent before you to prepare a place for you, a place where you will be delivered from the famine that is to come upon the earth. It had already begun at that point. And so the brothers embracing is a preview, that group hug that I've talked about, the brothers embracing in reconciliation and full forgiveness, is a preview of heaven, it seems to me, because that gesture of the embrace of the brothers in Egypt becomes frozen into the image of the gates of the New Jerusalem that are all arranged like the 12 brothers, 3 to a side. On each of the 4 sides, the 12 gates, and they are all embracing and receiving one another and standing together in a perfect unity of forgiveness and confidence that what God had meant for evil, what God had meant for, or what man had meant for evil, God had intended and ordained for good, and that good was eternal, even though the evil was a price exacted in time. The reward of persevering through all of that would be an eternal reward. And so we have the city of 12 gates that recall the brothers' embrace in Egypt at a time of full forgiveness. And the wall of the city had 12 foundations, and on them the 12 names of the 12 apostles of the Lamb. So we'll take a closer look at this next time. Thank you for listening. Please be sure to like and subscribe to my channel if this has been useful to you or intriguing. To learn more, you can visit my webpage, drwarrengage.com, or find me on my Patreon account, patreon.com/drwarrengage. I hope you'll join me next time on the Dr. Warren Gage podcast. Thank you.